Any second now. Whenever you're ready, Jake. All right. Good evening. My name is Bob Bryant, and I'll be moderating this evening's debate, which is resolved that Washington and Lee University should admit women to its undergraduate program. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out here live in Northern Auditorium. You're listening to WLUR in Lexington. Let's begin by introducing the affirmative team. Speaking first affirmative tonight will be Ted Fletcher, a senior religion major from Meridian, New Hampshire. Ted has run cross country for 2 years and played rugby for 2 years. Speaking second affirmative tonight will be Todd Smith, a senior English major from Tallahassee, Florida. Todd is a former editor of the Ringtum Phi and a member of the Sigma Chi social fraternity. Speaking first negative will be Markham Pyle, a senior double major in politics and philosophy. Markham's from Houston, Texas. Markham is currently president of the Pi Sigma Alpha Politics Honors Fraternity, co-chairman of the WNL Muscular Dystrophy Association, and an editorial cartoonist for the Ringtum Phi. Speaking second negative is Michael M. Shelton, a junior history major from Yorktown, Virginia. Michael is currently vice chairman of the College Republicans and treasurer for the Washington and Lee Mock Convention. He is also active in the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and the University Federation. The way the debate will be run tonight, we'll be hearing 4 7-minute constructive speeches from each of the debaters, followed by a 3-minute cross-examination from the opposing team. We're then going to take a 5-minute break, have 4 4-minute rebuttals, and then we're going to open questions up from you, the audience, for both teams to respond to on issues that were either covered or not covered in the debate. With that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to the first affirmative.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for coming to what I hope will be an exchange that gets beyond some of the shrill language that's been used in letters in the Ringtum Phi and some of the bombast that one finds on the bumpers of a lot of area cars. Resolved that Washington and Lee University should admit women to its undergraduate program. The most persuasive argument for coeducation can be broken down into 3 categories. Academic arguments, or ones that center on the present academic experience. Economic or demographic arguments, which center on what is happening in society at large. And ethical or philosophical arguments, which connect both here and there, and ask some rather far-reaching questions. The academic arguments center primarily on pedagogic deficiencies in the classroom. That is to say, a faculty member's ability to discuss a wide range of topics, to look at a wide range of opinions, to look at a wide range of literature, whatever. But the primary purpose of the university is to bring a wide variety of ideas and a wide variety of opinions to a given place, a given geographical setting, and to see how they interact. And clearly, women, by nature of a different experience in their lives, offer something different to say in a lot of different issues. For instance, abortion, for instance, feminism, for instance, what one's role as a parent might be. I think the faculty here at Washington Lee recognizes this, and I believe that's why they are overwhelmingly in favor of coeducation. Clearly, they see that their ability to address this diversity of opinions in an intellectual way, in a way in which is partly taken outside of the context and yet is not so far removed that one does not get to some real concrete answers. Clearly, that is why they are among those pushing the issue. And I have some examples. I think the examples, with the possible exception of the natural sciences, which at least pretend to have an objectivity to their subject matter, I think in all other areas of discourse here, any other academic area, there is an element of subjectivity in the way a student approaches the matter, whatever they're studying. From a literature professor, someone involving in books. I must admit, however, that few great pre-modern works have been written by women. So he acknowledges that that some literature, to begin with, is beyond the question of male and female. But he goes on to say that, and he considers here Shakespeare a sort of middle modern writer. When I introduced a seminar on pastoral to Shakespeare's As You Like It, they were convinced to a man that Shakespeare meant to satirize and condemn Rosamond because she assumes the dominant role in a courtship passage after passage. No argument can convince these students, and they were intelligent students. I mean, they weren't freshmen. These are a senior seminar, as I understand it, and they were unable to see a different point of view. Every single one of them. It was monolithic. And from another example, a sociology professor came to me and said, I'll be talking about feminism in a couple of weeks, and there won't be a woman there to be able to present the argument. And from a philosophy professor saying that I'll be in an introductory philosophy course talking about abortion, and a woman who would be the one dealing with the issue would be unable to present her opinion because she simply wasn't allowed to come to the school. Now, as for demographic arguments, I think they're obvious, and I think most of us know them. In the future, very near future, enrollment will decline unless women are admitted. I mean, that's simply a fact. There aren't the people out there. The baby boom came, the baby boom went. Women aren't having children anymore in the numbers, and what can you do? You can't go out there and beat bushes everywhere. The admissions committee has gone all over this country looking for applicants, and has only been able to maintain the present level. That's all. It hasn't been able to get significant more applicants. It hasn't been able to reverse a decline in the quality. There's upward movement at the top echelon, but in the majority of the students, there's been some decline. The numbers are 25% of high school graduates will decline between now and 1990. In the key 15 states, with the exception of Texas, Mr. Pyle's home state, it'll be 33. 33% will decline. That includes New England, includes the Midwest, and it includes the far west, with, I suppose, the possible exception of California, which also has a significant population increase. So the numbers are obvious, and all the administration has addressed them. Primarily, Dean Hartog and President Wilson have been trying to go out and talk about and say, look, what are we going to do? It's a clear question of whether you want to get a smaller school and maintain the quality, or whether we want to maintain the same size and admit increasingly deficient students. Simply said. Now, as to ethical and philosophical arguments, I think these have been around for quite some time, 15 years at least, since the late 60s. And this is the primary reason why other schools went co-ed. I mean, simply said, it was for pedagogic reasons. The baby boom was still going then. As we've seen in the past 15 years, women have gotten to the far reaches of our society. We've got women in media, we got women in law, we got women in business, and they're going higher and higher. We're getting, every year you see more and more women on boards of directors, boards of this, boards of that. 33% of lawyers under the age, I believe, 27 are women, and it increases every year. Now, do we want to deny those people leaders in our society? Do we want to deny them admission to this great school. Excuse me? There are some serious questions, I think, that one has to ask here. And General Lee, when he came here in 1865, yeah, a lot longer than we tend to think. When he came here then, he saw that a lot of changes had to be made, and he was not afraid to make them. Now that brings in time? Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're supposed to skip that.
Mr. Fletcher, do you actually posit that the lack of women really constrains any able-bodied professor from introducing any topic in the classroom?
Absolutely.
You do? Then do you believe that men and women are really so different as to preclude intelligent discussion among and between members of the single sex?
Have you ever considered having an abortion?
I'm afraid that need hasn't arisen. You cite overwhelming faculty support for coeducation. What evidence do you have for that?
Well, in informal surveys taken since, I believe, 1960.
Where could one get one's hands on these informal
I
surveys?
suggest you go into the Rington 5 passage.
I have been into the Ringtime 5 for every issue this year, and I have not found one thing on a faculty poll, not one thing.
Well, you didn't go very far.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fletcher. I have a few more questions. You say that it is absolute fact that women are the only way that this university can increase its enrollment. Do you believe that?
I believe it is the most sensible way that they can stem a decline in enrollment.
You think that all means
wait a minute. I don't think the question is whether we're going to increase enrollment.
Will you please answer my question? Do you think that all recruitment, all means of recruitment, additional recruitment have been exhausted? I got that from the gist of your speech.
Yes.
Are you aware that only 2 students from Chesterfield County, one of the largest counties in the state of Virginia, probably one of the most populous, definitely the fastest growing, only 2 students have attended here in the past 10 years? I believe that's correct, from Chesterfield County. You call that effective recruitment?
Indeed, I do. I think that perhaps the best way to get students from Chesterfield County is to admit women.
Do you think so? Another thing, you cite the impending doom in the number of applications in decline. Do you have the exact number?
Yep.
I'm
I do, as a
interested.
matter of
I'm
fact.
interested. I'd like to have the exact number on the doom.
How far do we need to go?
Let's say from
Okay,
let's take a decade.
Between 1979 and 1982, the 18-year-old population decreased by 268,000 or 9%.
Thank you. One last question, and then I'll leave you alone. One last question. Are you aware that in 1977, this university, I believe I'm correct when I state this, hit rock bottom in applications, but then in a mere 4-year period, by 1981, we had already reached a record number of applications?
Yeah, I am. And I think there's a very
Thank
good explanation for that, if I may answer your question.
I think you've answered it sufficiently. Thank you very much.
I think if Pyle answered the question for the audience, obviously he's making
you're entitled. I think you've answered my question.
There was a new dean of admission at that time. I think that explains it.
The one we've got?
It is, I think, appropriate that the debate was set up so that the affirmative team is espousing the proposition that we become a coeducational institution, because that leaves them with the burden of proof. I think that is appropriate not only tonight, but in the greater debate of which this is a part and a skirmish. The thought is not original with me. John Delane Wilson has reiterated full several times that the burden of proof is on them who propose so substantial a change. He and Banwell, in a remarkably well-thought-out letter, pointed out that it was for those who propose change to prove that a positive benefit would accrue, rather than merely staving off potential risks. Scott Mason, I guess, had it best in the fight when he said that everyone who has proposed coeducation to date has worried more about what might happen if we don't go co-ed than what will happen if we do. The point is that the affirmative proposal has to make a positive contribution, has to go on beyond staving off potential disasters of one form or another, and actually better the school. Of course, this first assumes that they are a bulwark against disaster. This prompts a few questions, including the question, what disaster? The coeducationists have consistently pointed to drops in enrollment. They have heavily pushed the idea that there will be a considerable drop as far as percentage is concerned. The raw figures tell a slightly less horrific story. Moreover, they place a great deal of emphasis on the idea of the quality student, that is, someone with board scores of 1390 or so. It is interesting to note that those people may not do as well as people who were waitlisted once they get here. They may not contribute as much to academic discussion, and most importantly, they may not have as good an edge when it comes to dealing with people. The ability to be all things to all mankind is probably the definitive hallmark of a gentleman. It is the mark of all persons of courtesy, and someone raised on Livy, Suetonius, Locke, and Burke in a lonely library may not have learned as well to deal with people as persons perhaps less academically oriented. I speak from personal experience, having been one of the former who has had to learn at this institution what it is to deal with people on their own level. And it was about time. There's also the idea that we cannot ride out these potential disasters. I would point out that after surrender at Appomattox, the entire southern nation was prostrate. Its manpower had been decimated, and more than decimated, by the war. When, in 1865, for the fall term, the University of Alabama opened its doors, one student showed up. They had to shut back down. We were being headed by a man whose fame had spread throughout the country. That was some help in getting people here. On the other hand, it is not good for an institution to be headed by a man under federal indictment for treason. It is difficult to make long-range plans in this fashion. Now, at that time, both Oberlin and Bridgewater were coeducational. The first, at least, had suffered no diminution of respect as a result. Robert E. Lee was a gambler, the least conservative of the great captains of war. He was busy rebuilding this institution from the ground up and making it over in his own image. We do not find, despite the existence of precedents, despite the character of the man himself, that the question of coeducation was never considered or fought on. We're a resilient institution, as exampled by what Mr. Shelton has pointed out. In 1977, we were scraping the bottom of the barrel. We had no idea where we were going to find people to come here. By 1981, 4 years later, we were an all-time admissions high. We are a remarkably resilient institution. We are able to tack when necessary. There are also, I might add, other positive alternatives, like recruitment in the West, in the Midwest, and New England. There are people from Massachusetts, including one gentleman who is taking my picture at this moment, who had not until quite late heard of WNL. This is not, I think, the mark of a admissions office that is lean, hungry, and in fighting trim. We also have instituted the alumni admissions program. Of course, when I had lunch with the alumni, their primary complaint was that no one seems to listen to their recommendations. Oh, there are positive alternatives indeed, so that even if these disasters should befall, there is no need to fly post-haste to the coeducationist alternative, nor can it offer the positive benefits which are the only excuse for such a radical remaking of ourselves. As for the moral arguments, women have made it in this society. They've made it over obstacles which we, from time to time, as men, have been guilty of putting up, and they have made it on their own. It strikes me as offensively sexist to suggest that they need the aid of the dominant male, that they need to be admitted to Washington and Lee to continue to take their rightful place in the four ranks of society. There are over 100 women's colleges in this country. There is a demand for that. There are 5 institutions of higher learning that are all male. 2 of them are military academies. That leaves 3 liberal arts schools. With all respect to Hampton-Sydney graduates out there, there is only one worth going to. Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Sewanee, and UVA are coeducational, we are not depriving anybody, my friends. As for the educational need at W&L, it strikes me as sexist to assert, it strikes many feminists as sexist to assert that women are such a different breed, they need to be brought in for anthropological study in the classroom. As a gentleman pointed out in the faculty, there is no such thing as a women's view on the reunification of Germany or monetarist policy. There is error and there is truth. Scholars of either sex are perfectly competent to find it. I might also add that those who think that we have become a sexist generation by not having women around were effectively answered by a very, very competent professor of psychology who, finding a letter in the Phi that seemed rather sexist in tone, suggested not coeducation, but a course in women's history. Ms. Margand, I think I see you out there. That strikes me as an argument from authority. Social normalcy. As John D. Wilson has noted, it is a great disservice to our graduates to suggest that they have difficulty surviving in a co-ed world. It is a sexist remark. I think we as gentlemen are free of all social milieu. There are positive reasons also to avoid this disaster. I said disaster. For one thing, if you look in the fact book, the admissions office own figures, 33% of the people came here because of tradition. Now, what is one of our most striking traditions, I would ask? Well, it beats the heck out of the 10% who said they aren't here because we are all male. I might add that the ones who got away were those who were so close-minded as not to be willing to cast aside their preconceived notions of what a university ought to be to try something the Western world has found for many years to be useful. People like that could not have been made scholars of, no matter how much money we spent on them. Finally, there is the question of cost. There is Title IX compliance in the athletic department. There is, in addition, the cost of alumni giving. We do not recognize a moral necessity as we recognized in coeducation, and I doubt then that they will support the bastardization of the school. I suggest that we not do so.
Given Washington Lee's many traditions, what do you consider its best one?
I would have to say the honor system, but I don't think you can take one tradition and separate it from the rest. They all seem to function together. If one goes, the others may fall.
And is one's adherence to the honor system predicated upon one's sex?
Of course not. But until one has learned the arguments, the moral arguments in favor of such, one is brought up, I think, by nurture, by the awe that it inspires, not by the penalties it threatens. And people of a non-traditional cast of mind, male or female, in the 20th century may find this sort of thing rather outdated. That worries me.
And you, I take it, believe then that the admission of women would not, they would not appreciate that tradition.
I do not think so. I am concerned not that women cannot appreciate that tradition, but that persons of either sex with no respect for tradition, persons who will come here on the condition we remake ourselves, will have no respect for that or any other tradition.
Well, we're arguing here coeducation, and it seems to me that you're suggesting that by going co-ed, we're going to have people here less inspired by tradition.
That seems to me a possibility, and I do not think it is a risk we can run for such tenuous benefits as you are claiming.
Have you talked to anybody in the admissions staff or anybody in the administration or anybody of any particular educational authority anywhere in this country about the declining number of high school graduates into the next decade?
I have indeed. I have been, in preparation for this debate, over the admissions office figures with a fine-tooth comb. I had a fairly lengthy chat with John D. Wilson before I wrote my article in the Phi some weeks back on this subject. I have researched the matter, yes.
Okay, then I would like you to respond to this quote from a report to the faculty. Assuming, 1, we were able to hold our present position between now and 1992. 2, the economy and federal financial aid picture remain clear. And 3, we will expect to enroll a class in 1992 academically comparable to 1982, and the class in 1996 will number no more than 265.
I would respond to that by suggesting first that there are assumptions in that report, which I have seen, which are unstated, assumptions about where and what sort of recruiting effort we want to have. I would also respond with a quotation from John Locke. Facts are intrusive things, and in times of great passion, men are often tempted to fudge them.
Okay. Then, from that, I take it then are you suggesting that the administration and the admissions staff have a silent agenda and they are therefore trying to force coeducation down the throats of Washington and Lee against its better wishes?
I do not suggest that there is a
That they're being
conspiracy.
dishonest.
I do not suggest that they are being dishonest. I do suggest that when one commissions a study, one usually gets the results one wanted in the first place.
We all bored yet? I'm nervous, so thanks for coming. I hope we don't sound too banal. A debate can be, a silly type thing. And one of the things I don't like about it is the fact that as the pro side, the burden of proof is on us to say why we would like to change Washington and Lee. That's fine, but in terms of the debate on campus, it's not really such a simple question. In fact, the burden of proof about change is on both sides because we're on shifting ground here. Certainly facts can be fudged, but all instruments that we have indicate that it's going to be a dark, cold day for drawing students to Washington and Lee in the next 10 years. The fact is that by 1996 we could have a student body that's 400 students smaller than the campus we have now. And what does that mean? It means cutting out about a quarter of the faculty. It means less people to work for the Ring Tum Phi, less people to work for the EC. And so if we don't do that, then the question is admitting students of lower quality. I have talked to Mr. Hartog, and a man I respect, and he says that within the next 10 years, we could be taking all comers, that we could admit all applicants. That would not be the type of school that would hold on to a good faculty, in my opinion. Let's look at the case of Davidson, which in 1960 had comparable SATs, which again is high SAT people are called squibs in the paper. Markham and I are National Merit Scholars, but we're squibs. But in another, look at it in a different way. In 1972, we both accepted about 60% of our applicants. Now, 10 years later, Davidson accepts 35% of its applicants, and we accept 60%. This means that they can accept fewer people because they know that the people to whom they will extend an invitation to come will accept that invitation. We're a second-choice school right now. They're a first-choice school. They say it's because of coeducation. I've talked to the Associate Dean of Admissions. I've talked to one of their directors of the Annual Giving Fund. They say that coeducation is the best thing that ever happened to them. And so that's what I mean by sinking ground. If Washington and Lee stays where we are, there will be great changes in this university. And so the question moves to tradition, which Markham says is the reason why 33% come here. Thank you. We, in favor of coeducation, are in favor of the tradition of Robert E. Lee's honor system. We're in favor of a strong EC. We're in favor of student regulation, student control of student behavior. We're in favor of IFC control of the fraternities. We're in favor of a strong, independent Ring Tum Phi. We're in favor of the Division III philosophy in athletics. We're in favor of the high quality of this faculty, a faculty which is not pushed to publish, but is pushed to have an intimate relation, which is pushed to have close relations. push to have close relations with the student body. And most of all, our overarching tradition is the liberal education. Now, if the size of the school were to drop, so that student quality would remain the same, we would have to cut professors. We would have to cut 1 in 4 professors. How do we do that? When Mr. Shillington comes up for retirement, do we not replace him? Do we not have someone to teach organic chemistry? Would that be a hallmark of a liberal education, to not be able to take organic? Or say the next person I think to go would be an expert in French literature. Do we just write that off? I don't think so. And what if we take all comers? Will we be able to hold on to a quality faculty if anyone who wants to come to WNL can come to WNL? Same thing holds true about honor. This liberal education is certainly the most important tradition at Washington and Lee. The all-maleness hardly contributes to this. When we talk about what the purpose of Washington and Lee is, what its mission is, we're talking about knowledge for its own sake for 4 years. The faculty expresses it. The opportunity for a brief time to pursue knowledge purely for its own sake and to exercise the intellect solely for the pleasure of doing so. I don't see what this has to do with being all male. Finally, when we talk about tradition, we have to wonder how Robert E. Lee would think about this. Robert E. Lee attracted me here. My father was an alumnus. I really liked the idea of going back to 1954 when he was here, of big college weekends and all maleness. But the reason I've stayed here is because it's a forward-looking university with a tradition of liberal education. I think Robert E. Lee meant it for it to be that way. In this research by Mr. Flood, it said, what was emerging from all this in the first months following Robert E. Lee's installation as president was one of the first elective systems in the country. It was a sharp, conscious departure from the classic steeped pre-war education of Southern gentlemen, all of whom were expected to take exactly the same courses in college, no matter what they planned to do in life, etc. When these plans took their larger form at Washington College, they would attract national attention and praise in the Midwest and North as well as the South. Under Lee's guidance, the thrust of this reorganization was to result in 10 new departments, expanded graduate studies, and a range of special programs and offerings, including a proposed course in photography that would make this school one of the most innovative in the nation. I don't see anything in there about all male. We're talking about traditions of honor and student regulation of student life. These things are in the balance. We're on shifting ground. We can move forward to a high position. We can go backwards with a smaller student body or a less impressive faculty. Thank you.
Nothing like the scent of blood in the evening. On the subject of Davidson, I take it you are aware that when the decision was made to go co-ed, that all 3 constituent elements of the college had.
Yes.
Do you see the same situation obtaining here?
No.
Could you just, and am I glad to hear it? I'm glad you asked me that. Can you then imagine what sort of dissension and us against them mentality, I think Scott Mason called it, that a move in this direction bids fair to create?
We can't move forward without a debate, and I wouldn't shirk from the arena of debate. I think it's a good thing. It's a purifying thing, and it's good to see students shirking their apathy for once. I hope it continues.
I don't know. I've never had the energy to be apathetic. As far as tradition goes, you say what you want is Washington and Lee as it is, but with women. Correct?
That's a simplification.
Is it an unjust simplification?
I think that the best way to preserve most of our traditions is to get rid of the habit of single-sex education.
Uh-huh. Now, you expect then that the sort of people who turn down WNL as it is without women would now come here, correct?
Pardon me?
The people who said, no, bag it. I started to apply, I knew you were all male, but now I don't want it. They'll come here if we go co-ed, right? The people we're losing.
I think that's possible.
All right. The question then remains, if they did not like WNL as it is in what you consider its essential requirements then, will they like it as it will be with those same essential requirements later? If you're going to maintain the same sort of WNL but with women, the persons who said they had no taste for the WNL tradition, if they come here, are they really going to want to come to WNL?
The people who said they weren't going to come here because it was a monastery are the ones that are...
They have not been around on Friday nights. But,
Okay, I think we're out of time.
okay.
Washington and Lee, and I think we tend to lose sight of this sometimes, is the sole all-male liberal arts institution in the nation that can rival a Harvard or a Yale or Princeton. There is a spirit about this place, and I think you have to grant me that. The all-male camaraderie lends a feeling of community. And Todd, I'm glad you mentioned this. We're small and we're people to our professors. We are not numbers. We can and do have a special relationship with our teachers. And the greatest testimony to this comes from your interview with Dean Doug Siders at Sewanee. He said when they went co-ed, and I'm quoting him now, there was something intangible that was lost. There was a kind of closeness among students and faculty that's not the same today. End of quote. With our all-male atmosphere, says John D. Wilson, quote, we have had a pattern of success, unquote, and we shouldn't change. For 235 years we've been this way. Our opponents tonight point out that in the next decade, the number of graduating high school seniors will drop 26%, 35% in the states where WNL draws the majority of its students. All colleges will feel the crunch. All colleges, not just single-sex colleges, and all are going to vie for the cream of the crop. Now, our opponents suggest that the way to attract more applicants is to join the crowd, to bury ourselves in a sea of smiling faces. I suggest that the way to compete for more students is to stand out and be unique and be the special place that we are. Otherwise, we don't save or enhance this school, this institution. We are going to replace it with a totally different, unfamiliar institution. But, quote, we're teaching young men, some will say, to believe that they are the serious citizens of society and that women are only ornaments or social and recreational dimensions of our lives, unquote. Now, whoever made this comment deserves to be reprimanded in the strongest possible terms. That anyone, especially one in a position of authority, could say such a thing is absolutely repugnant. I challenge that person to name one misogynist, one wife beater, one rapist that this institution has turned out because of its all-male atmosphere. We are no monastery. Our graduates have been going into a co-ed world successfully since 1749. We don't go around believing that women aren't people or are second-class citizens. I've about had it up to here with that accusation. I'm not, and we're not sexist simply because we believe that the all-male tradition enhances WNL's stature and, most importantly, adds to our liberal education. Again, remember what Dean Siders from Sewanee commented on. Another thing, we're sick and tired of being compared to the racists of the 1960s when we speak of alternatives. Guilt by insinuation is just not going to cut it, fellas. Quality education exists for those who prefer a co-ed atmosphere, yet why must Washington and Lee go co-ed? The nerve of some people, and I came across this letter in the Ringtum Phi, and it shocked me, who suggest that we're free to go to Hamden, Sydney, is absolutely sickening. That's the same mentality that argued Jews were free to leave Nazi Germany's in the 1930s, and it's equally as repugnant. What's more, we survived the far worse late 1960s and early 1970s when a traditional school like WNL was really under the gun and asked for the quote-unquote impending doom that awaits us in 10 years Is that really the case? You know, I asked Mr. Fletcher in cross-examination, what would be the drop in applicants from 1982 to 1992? It's 452 men. Now, that is in the 15 states that we draw most of our students from. Now, fellas, that is 45 students in 10 years in these states, in each one of these states. So that is 3 students per state for each of those 10 years that we need to find to make up the difference. Now, don't we have faith in our faculty, in our admissions officers, and our alumni to find those 3 men, and for considerably less money than would be needed for the changes to our physical plant that coeducation would dictate? Of course we do. I dare say no one I've talked to is ready to destroy Washington and Lee as we know it, to jettison 235 years of tradition for the lack of 3 men. Let's look at the negative effects of coeducation. Number 1, at Sewanee, the number of fraternities has remained the same, but a significant decline in membership has taken place. How can the fraternity system at Washington and Lee survive if 17 fraternities have to compete for 100 or 150 men? Fraternities simply aren't going to be able to, as Emory Ellinger points out, pay their bills, and they're going to have to fold. Now, I'm not a fraternity member, but I recognize that they play an important role at Washington and Lee. Another thing about sports, according to Coach McHenry, we're going to have to fire some professors to hire women professors, and we'd have to double the size of the student body to provide all these sports. That's nonsense. Another thing, 3 elements of the community at Davidson supported coeducation: the students, the faculty, and the alumni. Now, I asked Mr. Fletcher for some evidence that the faculty supported coeducation. He referred to some nebulous informal polls, and I have yet to see any of them. Number 2, about the students. Now, Bob Genevine took a lot of flack for a student poll he conducted, but he wanted gut reactions, and he got them. He got the votes of 600 students, and we're going to have another one after this thing's been discussed. Now, 75% of the students voted against coeducation. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. Now, what happens if WNL goes co-ed? Do we alienate then 75% of the students that might be interested in coming to this school? And about David Bowen's survey, now this is interesting. The students favoring coeducation in that survey did so because it would improve social life. And one's tempted to substitute here party time rather than academics. And the last thing I'm going to close with about alumni. The decision to go co-ed would definitely alienate the alumni of this school. William Norman, Vice President of the Alumni Board. If there is any possible way that WNL could remain as an all-male institution, I'd be the first to say that it was folly to try to change that. And he says about this administration, we were not given and have not been presented a totally balanced view if there is an opposing view. Another thing, James Slay says it's change for change's sakes. And get this, friends, he says we've never had any problem with young men being turned off by the single sex. In fact, he hints that losing the all-male spirit could damage WNL irreparably. One last thing I'm going to say. I. Langston Donkel says if they, the admissions office, will get out and do their work, then no problem exists. Now, Hampden-Sydney deserves our respect in at least one regard. When the going got tough, the tough got going. They realized that the key to a declining enrollment is to increase recruiting. Now, our admissions office is about to go through the biggest sellout since Munich, because they're going to give up they're going to wave the white flag before firing the first shot. Thank you. Can I get a drink of water, Todd?
Sure. The tough got going at Hampden-Sydney, but not here at WNL is the implication. What the alumni, the admissions, I want you to speak to this. What the admissions people do is they take the list from the national, from the testing people that do the SAT, and they take this list and they pair out all the women, so half of it's gone. Then they look at the people that are within our SAT range, and then they send WNL brochures and propaganda to 60,000 college-age young men. How would you go about improving on this way to sell WNL?
Todd, I think one of the things that needs to be addressed, and I'm glad you brought it up, I met a prospective freshman the other day, and I don't know what the answer is, but I want to tell you this story. This prospective freshman went for an interview in the admissions office, and I saw him twice that day. When he left the first time,
Keep it short, just one of the times.
He was on a cloud. I used up all my breath in the last speech, Todd, so give me a break. And he was on a cloud. He really was enthusiastic about WNL, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't have too much of a chance to talk to him, but he went on. And then I saw him later that afternoon, and he didn't look very happy. Didn't look very impressed. He looked down to me. And I asked him, I said, what's the problem? And he said, well, he said, when I was in that admissions office, they fed me the all-male line until, he said, and I loved it. He said, they fed it to me and fed it to me, and the only thing they talked about was the great all-male tradition here at Washington and Lee. But when I got to the dorms, someone told me that we were considering going co-ed. He said, not once did the admissions office tell me that. Now, if the admissions office, Todd, thinks that this is the greatest thing that ever happened to Washington and Lee and is going to so dramatically turn around our recruitment program, then the thing that I want to know is why aren't they telling prospective freshmen this?
Thank you. You say that Dean Siders at the University of the South, Sewanee, says that something intangible was lost. Did you consider reading to the audience the rest of his statement, which is a lot of it, that closeness and intangibleness, was out of necessity too. You just didn't go out on a date. He means.
Yes, Todd.
Wait, let me.
Okay,
there's more that you left out. He says the University of the South has been nicer since it went co-ed, and it's a more normal social situation it's a more normal community with a better social situation. Did you consider reading that to you?
Well, Todd, you've tried to embarrass me, and and I think probably that you succeeded, but I want to read one other thing to you from his speech. Where is it?
What do you want to read? I wrote the story, so I know.
It's Dean Sider. Now, Dean Sider was tickled to death.
Can we move on to?
No, I'd like to answer your question if I could. Time? Okay.
Go ahead. No.
Pardon? And go ahead and answer. Wait a minute.
You go ahead and answer the question.
Please, go ahead and answer.
Dean Siders, one of the reasons he said that everybody was tickled that Sewanee went co-ed was because he said, when I was a student in 65, there were just 3 big weekends when women were here, and otherwise we just sat around the fraternity house and listened to the jukebox and thought about how miserable we were. Now, I've said once before, and I'll say it again, everybody out there does, I suggest that he get in a car as soon as this is over and drive to Sweetbriar or Mary Baldwin or Hollins or someplace else. And I thank you.
All right, then. We're gonna.
I'll drive it.
Okay, then we're going to take a break. Excuse me. We're going to take a break for about 5 minutes, give these people a chance to get out of these hot lights. We're using a lot of water, I realize. LUR, you should sign off right now, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Please do not come up on stage. Thank you. Anytime. Alrighty, we're back live here in Northern Auditorium. We're in the middle of a debate. Resolved that Washington and Lee University should admit women to its undergraduate program. I'd like to take this time right now to remind you that this is being broadcast live on WLUR 91.5 FM in Lexington, Virginia, and will be broadcast on Cable 9 television 2 weeks from tonight. Not sure of the date, but that's the Wednesday after we get back from break at 7:30 p.m. on Cable Channel 9. We're due up now for rebuttal speeches from each of the 4 speakers, after which time we will open up the floor to questions. Right now, Markham, are you ready?
Yes.
All right.
What a question.
Well, it's the numbers game, I guess. Let me go back to those numbers. 452 men over the next decade in a 15-state area. That's 45 men a year. That is, if you look at it the other way, 30 men over that decade per state. That's 3 men per year per state. It would concern me, were we unable, given all that this university does have to offer, things, mind you, that we have to offer which the affirmative team does not wish to change by their own admission. The question, of course, whether they can change admissions policy so radically and not perhaps jeopardize some of this is one we will address shortly. But they don't want to lose what they regard as the salient experience of WNL. It is obviously something to offer. Now, if we can't get another 3 men per state per year on the basis of that, with a little recruitment, with the alumni admissions program, we are probably in serious trouble. And it would tend to suggest to me that not only we, but a lot of other people are going to be in trouble. One wonders what would become of higher education in the country, were the figures really as black as they have been painted. Consider this also. There is the deluge of mail that goes out to persons in the appropriate bracket of the SAT scores, prospective college students. There's a vast deluge of mail. Letter carriers groan under the weight of it. You get something from every state university in the country. You get private colleges knocking at your doorstep. It is easy to get lost in the shuffle. It is especially easy if you're recruiting tours. Your one-on-one stuff never takes you outside the original 13 colonies and the rest of the Confederacy. This can be a problem, recruiting in the heartland, if the only way you see these people is with the mail. Let me relate something from my own experience. Oh, and by the way, I heard some snickers when it was suggested that this place was the only all-male institution that could compete with a Yale or a Penn. Not to be too egregious, but I did turn down both those places to be here. For one thing, it's a lot further south. I do not like winter. But there were substantive reasons as well, I admit. Like New Haven in Philadelphia. No. Substantive reasons regarding the value of an education in a small place where one is not a number on a computer printout, something I have never really cared to be. Now, from my own experience, we had, for the little suburban semi-private district I was in, one of those things that were formed, with the zoning and the title deed restrictions. Those things, and I'm not saying I admire it, I'm just telling you what it was like. We had a college night for the entire district. There's this one lonely, tired-looking guy sitting at a table with a placard that says WNL. I walked over. He was an alum. He'd gotten home from the brokerage. He was sitting down to his second martini, and they call him. What had they forgotten to do? Well, they forgot that one of the larger places and seminars in Houston was having a college night and hadn't sent anybody. But the place that so inspired him is to go out and do it. That shows me two things. One, what we have had in the past as far as admissions and persons. And the other thing, not just what this school is capable of inspiring, but the complete and utter incompetence that occasionally marks even the best of bureaucracies. The question, of course, whether or not the admissions office is the best bureaucracy. There are no substantive reasons of staving off disaster to go coeducational. I think we've fairly well scotched ab initio from the beginning. These purported moral and educational arguments, they are sexist. They stink in the ear. There is nothing to be done in favor of the proposal. I urge that it be adopted not at all. In fact, if you can keep a straight face, let's dismiss it out of hand.
Thank you, Mr. Pyle. Given your arguments, I think you should be an expert on sexism. I think one of the most sexist things is to try and banish women from Lexington 5 days a week. And with a possible exception Wednesday nights, Tuesday nights in the pit. But I don't think see anything sexist about having women here every day. And indeed, there is a serious problem, as you have pointed out. And I think there's a serious problem only recruiting with male, as you said. Well, that's a really curious statement, because male is spelled two ways, if anybody's an English major. And I think that is part of our problem, that we only recruit with male, M-A-L-E. And I think opinion among students and among alumni, if you really went out and looked, and quite aside from that really farcical poll taken by the EC, if you really went out and polled alumni and polled students, you'd find that it was much more evenly split between the opinion. I've seen a lot from the alumni office, a lot of alumni letters, particularly from more recent classes, I'd say from the late 50s, where people are really pushing the place to go co-ed. People in education, people in social services, people in business, law, every field you can possibly imagine. So they want to send their daughters here, or their granddaughters here. It's perfectly explainable. I mean, I think there's some good reasons why alumni would want the place to go co-ed. Academics at those schools that have gone co-ed have increased substantially, and we've talked quite a bit about Davidson tonight. SATs at Davidson, since their decision in 1972 to go co-ed, have increased 100 points. That's a considerable jump. And two colleges that I'm familiar with, Williams and Dartmouth, which were avowedly very male schools, incidentally, and were isolated, coeducation's helped them substantially, and they have not lost a lot of that masculine camaraderie, that sense of brotherhood, that sense of togetherness. Granted, fraternities no longer exist at Williams, but that was done right at the start. They do exist at Dartmouth. Witness Animal House, I think, was taken from Dartmouth, as I recall. So, fun and hijinks after co-ed don't have to stop. Once we admit our sisters in, it doesn't mean that things simply go down the tubes. Obviously, do you have the dictionary?
It's underneath.
Oh, it's underneath, thank you. Markham isn't very familiar with the word tradition because there are a lot of different ways to construe the word. I went 10 minutes before I came here to find out what it meant. And actually, it's from the Latin traditionare, which means to betray, to deliver, to surrender. I find that very interesting. And it is only until the very end, the very last one, a second to last, that we get to that which is handed down, a statement, belief, practice, transmitted from generation to generation. And there's nothing really in there that says anything about women or anything about sex, which are ideological disputes. They're ideological, and they have to do with how we construe our society, and not with those things in which we inherit and help us view our outside world. Thank you. I believe time's up. Good.
We've just been given the Latin root for tradition. But I tend to like what Burke said about it, that it's the wisdom of the ancients. And another thing, when the facts go against you in an argument, you tend to resort to ad hominem attacks. And I resent the attack on my colleague by Mr. Fletcher. I think it shows very little respect for people. And yet he asks us to have respect for women when he has no respect for persons out of hand. And I think, Mr. Fletcher, that shows callousness on your part. Now, Todd...
I apologize for Mr. Pyle.
I thank Mr. Fletcher. I think that shows some gentlemanliness on his part. Now, Todd Smith tried to embarrass me, and he succeeded. Todd's a whole lot more clever than I am. But I still want to go back to that quote from Dean Sider at Swanee, who said that when Swanee went coeducational, they lost something. They lost a rapport between the students and the professors. And I really don't think that we want to lose what we have going for us now at Washington and Lee. And I think if you will really reach down deep inside and ask yourselves, you know that that special something is there. John D. Wilson said it, we've been successful. For 235 years we've produced leaders, we've produced congressmen, we've got at least 3 senators in the United States Senate right now. We've produced leaders. We don't produce child beaters. We don't produce men who are ignorant of women's needs. We produce gentlemen. Another thing, we've been compared to Davidson, and Todd admitted that all 3 segments of the community at Davidson favored the change to coeducation. Now, those 3 segments are the students, the faculty, and the alumni. Now, I stated in my speech that the students were opposed to it, and not one member of the affirmative team questioned me about that, not one time. I think that shows that they think I must be right on that one. Secondly, they didn't raise any questions about the alumni. And yet they mentioned faculty support, and when I asked them for proof of that, they mentioned some nefarious informal polls. And you know, there was a professor, someone at this university wrote a letter in opposition to coeducation to the Ringtum Five. I believe it was last week, I'm not sure. But sure enough, as soon as he wrote it, or she wrote it, they were attacked for not signing their name. Well, friends, I don't know, maybe I'm going blind, but I haven't seen one letter in there, signed or unsigned, from any faculty member who supports coeducation. Now tell me if that's speaking out, and if that's challenging us to open up our minds and look seriously at this question. Another thing, the only reason that we've heard tonight, I think basically, is for coeducation, the overriding need at least, is that we're not going to be able to attract students. Well, I think we've shown that 3 men a state over a period of 10 years is not that great a burden. And I'm going to close with one last thing. Todd mentioned that General Robert E. Lee, I think he quoted Flood on this one, he dared to be different all his life. And I want to close with one thing. Can't we do the same thing today? Do we have to go with the rest of the stream? Can't we be different? And which takes more courage? And I'll close with the Lee family motto, non incautus futuri. Now, Mr. Fletcher might want to correct my Latin. But as far as I can understand, that means that we're not afraid, we're not unmindful of the future. And I think W&L men are tough, and yeah, I think we're compassionate, but I think that we're ready to go out and challenge the future as we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mike refers to Mr. Lee, to Reverend Lee, to Saint Lee, as a man who dared to be different. I think he dared to look forward. I think that's how I would define Robert E. Lee. They've portrayed the alumni as being intransigent against this, and this might be so, but I don't think that's the case. I think the alumni want what's best for the school, and I think when they think of what is best for the school, they think in terms of the liberal education. I know an alumnus who was president of ODK when he was here. He was president of his fraternity, the Delts. He became a successful alumnus and contributed to Washington and Lee. And when his son went to Washington and Lee, he was disappointed. And he encouraged his son to withdraw. I should know this man was my father. I came to Washington and Lee because I believed in tradition. I thought this school was going to be a close band of brothers. That turned out not to be exactly the case. But that's all right because the special something Mike talked about. For me, the special something became the liberal education, became the discipline of breaking down barriers of prejudice and ignorance. And so after 4 years here, 4 years struggling, I I think I don't see this school as a uniformly together, a band, a team, and so when you talk rightly so about the Nazi mentality that attacks y'all for your position, I think we ought to look at the other side of the coin. And here's a letter by Joe Whalen and Paul Fouch in the Ringtone File that says, "And this is what chafes me the most. If some students find that this school isn't right for them, why don't they go to another school that suits their tastes better instead of trying to change a very distinctive school like Washington and Lee?" I think that's about the same thing you were talking about. I think this debate should be carried out on a loftier level. But certainly, we're not the only perpetrators of this Nazi mentality. Washington and Lee has a tradition of breaking down barriers to ignorance, tradition of going for the liberal education, tradition of being one of the top schools. Why should people laugh when Washington and Lee compares itself to Yale and Harvard? I don't think they should, but I think they will as long as Washington and Lee academics decline. Davidson, I have to correct Mr. Fletcher, did not zoom ahead 100 points. Because SATs were falling all over the nation, it held its own. Washington and Lee fell 100 points, and under Mr. Hartog's administration has been able to stem that decrease. But he thinks it's only temporary until we admit women. This has been at times a silly debate, and yet it hasn't brought out. I mean, we've gone to the silliness before expending all the arguments. And I would just like you to look at us and say, wouldn't this debate profit from a woman's point of view? Wouldn't that bring something different? You're laughing. Wouldn't that bring something different to this debate? The women's perspective, people say there is no women's perspective. There's a women's perspective because in this country, we've got to admit, women have always been the losers. It's always been a question of why. What's the reason? Gloria Steinem, she's too pretty. Nancy Frieden's way too ugly. It's that kind of, if they brought that to this university, then this university could claim to preach the universality of human experience, and not until then. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to thank and congratulate the debaters at this time and open the floor up to some structured questions from you all. Could I have a time from the timekeeper? What time is it right now? 9:14. Okay, we're going to run 15 minutes until 9:30. We're going to run the questions in the following manner. Someone wanting to ask a question will raise their hand and be recognized by me, at which point the questioner is going to stand up, give his or her name, state the question. I will then repeat the question and throw it to either side. Side A will get 3 minutes to, a few moments to confer, and 3 minutes to answer the question. Side B will then have 3 minutes to give its response to the question. I have the right to rule any question out of order, and I will exercise that right to its fullest. The question, as I said, will last 30 minutes. There are to be no questions of a personal nature. We want to deal simply with the issues. At this time right now, if anyone would care to ask a question. Mr. Whitehead.
My name is Peter Whitehead, and I have a question I would like to direct to Mr. Pyle, which is as follows. The gentleman quotes a 3-man per state over the next 10 years admissions acceleration. Would it not be true if the old adage, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will be a path to your door? I doubt that the other schools of high quality, which you mentioned, have to accelerate their admissions in any respect. If we're going to be an institution of great respect, should people strive to come to us rather than us having to beat on doors to get them to come?
Okay, the question is then, why should W&L have to go knocking on people's doors to make up for the admissions drop-off? And it to the negative team. That's one thing. Address the question to either side, not to an individual.
Shall I take it, Mike? All right. right. In the first place, I do not have any figures on whether or not a similar sort of extra effort is going to be required by other schools, or should I say by schools of national stature. The thing is, if everything we're getting from the admissions office is correct about a nationwide demographic drop that recks nothing of state boundaries and that sort of thing, it would strike me as being probable that they would, and perhaps that some of them will have to scrape a lot harder than we look to be doing. I started to say other universities of national stature, and then I said, well, just universities of national stature to take us out of that, and I'll tell you why. It's not because we cannot compete one-on-one with a Princeton or a UVA, a Sewanee or a Dartmouth. It is because through ill luck and mismanagement, I think, for some time, the gospel has not been spread. It is a little much, I think, to expect of persons being deluged with vast quantities of material through ETS and the search service and so forth, to actually go out and look for a school which for a long time has been, I guess, a little embarrassed, afraid to make its name known, and embarrassed, I think, primarily because of what one member of the faculty called the herd instinct. When everyone else has gone one way for whatever reason, it's a little embarrassing to admit at professional conferences, it's a little embarrassing to stand up at college nights and say, well, yeah, we're a little different. It shouldn't be that way, no, but this is not an ideal world. You can't expect them, I think, to seek us out because we have not done enough to get our names before them.
Both Todd and I will respond to this question, and I will respond first. Indeed, we are embarrassed when we go out into the countryside and try and beat bushes to find applicants, and the primary reason is that it is not a diverse student body. And the most salient aspect about our lack of diversity is that there are not women enrolled here. Dean Huntley went up to New England, my region of the country, a couple of weeks ago, and for 2 days sat at a table without one prospective student. That's a bit lonely. The declining enrollments are coming, they're real, and if we don't do something, it's going to be a very sad time. And I think that's all it says. I don't know where they get their figures. They could get them from the moon, for all I've read, because they don't follow anything that I know of.
As Jack Kennedy would say, who will defend tradition in its hour of maximum danger? The question is, who will defend the traditions of Washington Lee? Who will defend its quality and its honor system, which comes down from Robert E. Lee? If it's not the people who deal with the facts, and I would like to hear the opposition deal with the facts. Now, when we project a 25% decrease, and remember, we're sending out letters to everyone who could possibly come to Washington Lee. When we consider that decrease, we're counting people who are already born. We're not making projections. We're counting people who are already born, and I think it's short-sighted. I think it's nihilistic or whatever you say, reductionistic, to just deny those facts. I mean, that's the situation. We've got to deal with it. The people who are going to keep the quality of Washington Lee up are going to be the ones who deal with those facts. They're going to look at facts like the fact that last year that the year before last year, we accepted 751 people, and then took to get the class, and then took 43 off the waiting list. Last year, we had less applications, but we took more people. We took 800 people instead of 750, and we had to take 90 off the waiting list. Now, is this trend going to continue? We've got to deal with that fact. In 1981, we took no one off the waiting list.
Right.
Washington, thank you.
Bob, do we get to read the record at all?
Next question. Okay, I see Mr. Harwood's hand up.
Todd Harwood, I'm an alumnus, and I'm curious what you all think about the experience of law school, which was forced to travel it. If you think that's helpful. or?
Okay, question is quite simple. What do you think of the experience of the law school? Has going coeducation helped it or hurt it? The affirmative team will respond first because the negative team responded first last time.
Well, indeed, it has helped it, and some of the brightest students over there are women. In fact, a lot of them are women, and there's just no question it's helped every aspect of the law school. I think if we went out and asked law students, I mean, I'd like to hear a law student get up and say that. I'm not a law student, but from all I know, it has. And as one person pointed out, an administrator, law school used to be in Tucker Hall, and women for a few years there, not very many, used to go up, and we used to see them because they used to go on colonnade to the co-op and things. So we could oogle and do things like that. Unfortunately, they're across the ravine here, and they're at a farther distance. I think it's helped it immeasurably. I don't really know. I can't answer that from personal experience, but a lot of my friends are law students, and a lot of them are women law students. So I think it's wonderful. Do you want to speak?
No.
Well, I really don't feel, neither one of us feels particularly qualified to answer that question. From all that I am aware of, I think it was a fine law school before. That certainly does not mean that it is not an equally fine or perhaps a better institution today. I think it was, however, unfortunate that the American Bar Association dictated to the law school that either you will go co-ed or you will lose your accreditation. And I am relieved that we do not have the guns to our head right now and are not being forced to go co-ed, that we can discuss it and that we can arrive at some solution that seems to appeal to the majority of the university community.
Alrighty, Mr. Patterson.
I should address two areas. One that Mr. Smith said, he talked about Dr. Shillington and his being replaced, and I wholeheartedly suggest that there are other highly qualified chemistry professors to teach organic chemistry should Dr. Shillington never leave. And I think that would be an affront to most of those professors that you insinuate that they could not teach his course. And secondly, you mentioned that there has been an increase in SAT scores, or at least not as great a decrease in SAT scores. And I would like to say that as a sophomore last year, I was proud that I was part of a freshman class that had a higher SAT, but I was very ashamed that our class had the lowest GPA at the end of the year of any freshman class.
Nelson, I'm looking for comments, for questions
No,
rather
you had a
than
question.
comments.
Should
Okay.
we answer and then they can answer?
Would you repeat the question for me?
The question is,
Mr. Smith understood.
Okay, yeah.
okay, Nelson caught me in a stupid statement. The point was, I said that what are we going to do in cutting out 25% of the faculty? When Mr. Shillington comes up for retirement, what are we going to do? Just not replace him? He takes this to mean, since I didn't define it very well, he takes this to mean that we can't replace Shillington. Well, I think he'd be irreplaceable, but I think we could find someone to teach organic. No, the question is, if the faculty goes down by 25%, how are we going to make those cuts? Are we going to just, the most humane way would be not to replace retiring teachers. That would be the way to do it without firing people. Or we can fire people. And that's what I meant by it. I meant if we're going to replace people, if we're going to fail to replace people, try to do it the humane way. That would be the way to do it. But the basic point that I was making, Nelson, was, where are we going to cut back? Whose department is going to get the axe? 25% would have to go if we lost 400 students. That seems obvious. How do we maintain the quality?
I'm glad that this subject came up. I wanted to mention it in my constructive speech. I, quite frankly, am a little bit tired of the student body here at Washington and Lee being described as getting continually poor. And I just want to point out some statistics on this year's freshman class. According to Dean Huntley, this is probably one of the most unique groups of individuals we've ever had on this school. They're more compatible than other classes have ever been. They were chosen from a pool of 1,562 applicants. We accepted 892, and 360 decided to attend. Now, out of those students, 14 finished first or second in their class, 12 were National Merit finalists, and 6 received WNL scholarships. So I'm glad that I got an opportunity to address that student. I think we've got a fine bunch of freshmen. And one other thing that I wanted to say, and I'm glad again it was raised, the idea of firing people and bringing the women's viewpoint to WNL, firing professors in particular and bringing the women's viewpoint to WNL. It seems to me that if we're going to go coeducational in order to provide a women's viewpoint, and we're going to fire professors in addition, I mean, at least in the athletics department, and I think it's going to probably have to extend over. If you logically extend this argument, won't you then have to even out the male-female ratio in the school as a whole in the terms of the professorships? Aren't you going to have to bring more women into the history department and into the politics department and into the English department? Now then I think you really get yourself into a bind when you have to fire certain professors to make way for certain female professors. And it seems to me that we've got a fine faculty as it is right now. And why do we need to tamper with the problem?
Okay.
Why do we need to create a problem? I'm sorry.
All right. And I see a question from the.
And Charles Mason back there by the camera.
Yeah, there we go.
And I think that's really the issue that's been missed in this debate. I think it's been a somewhat superficial and boring debate in my opinion, because the issue has been admissions. And I don't really understand why people think that women are going to be any more enthusiastic about career than men. The real question I'd like to ask is whether or not you think that the kind of liberal education, the open-mindedness of the students of WNL would or would not be improved if they were to live with women on an everyday basis, have them in their classes, treat them as colleagues, have debates with them on their team, rather than having to go on Friday night or Saturday night to Mary Baldwin or Southern Seminary, or to have them be described as people who show up on the campus on Tuesday nights, Friday nights, and Saturday nights. And we all can sort of understand what the implication means.
Okay, thank you. Question is. It's a very good question. Is would not the academic life be improved by and the humanitarian atmosphere in Washington will be improved by the addition of women? We'll go with the negative team first.
You are right, Robert. We are engaged in the pursuit of what are often called humane letters, in large part. The attempt through education to be more human, more humane, more qualified to go out into the world as leaven in a world increasingly cold to virtue, to honor, and courtesy. The question is whether women are so different in kind as to make it necessary to bring in these rare birds for our study, to bring them in and set them up at the front of the classroom so we can see what one looks like, what have you. I do indeed resent the idea that there can be such a thing as a women's viewpoint. I go back to this statement that there are only two views about propositions of fact, of logic. This includes such commonly thought subjective things as aesthetics, to take the most egregious example. There is fact, there is the scholarly opinion, regardless of the sex of the speaker or the thinker, that remains the same. It is objective. There is no such thing as a woman's view or a man's view on these issues, I do not think. Consequently, I see no purpose to be served in our humanization, in our education, by having women on campus. I might also point out earlier, someone suggested that not having women here means that we can never know what they are thinking. I would refer them to the invention of the printing press. Not having Socrates here does not mean we don't know what he thought. People long dead influence us. People not physically present influence us at every turn through various media. I think that can continue. I see no obstacle to that. I don't think it harms us in our pursuit of liberal education and being persons of courtesy not to have women here, because I do not think there is a difference in kind that makes their presence necessary, however desirable it may sometimes be.
I appreciate the... I appreciate the question because it was an issue that I tried to raise in my opening speech. Mr. Pyle had a mouthful that there's too much for me to respond in particulars. I think there's a lot there that warrants a lot of attention. Need I say more?
Yes.
There is a woman's point of view, and I've just touched upon a few of those issues. He talks about aesthetics and suggests that it's only an aesthetic issue. It isn't simply an aesthetic issue. One could look at it that way. I think it would be improved aesthetically if we had women here. But beyond that, we do not have women in the classroom. We do not have them here every day. And hence, when we see them in the dim dark of the fraternity house living room with music at 90 decibels, I think it does distort our view of them. And that's one of the primary issues that is here. And I'm sorry that we haven't addressed it more.
Yeah, I'm sorry too that we haven't addressed the issue. I know we're all eager to get down the road, and so perhaps we're abbreviating. What I resent the most is that, well, I don't resent it. I don't like the fact that our argument is called sexist because we want to bring in women to put on what was the expression last night? Put on the table and then carry them off. We look at them, they say their piece. It's not that simple. I mean, there's a women's viewpoint. We all know that. We decide to live without it for a while because of things like discipline. And, we won't be distracted in class. But let's remember that Washington Lee has always been a natural extension of American society until other schools went co-ed. Then we decided to wait out, to ride the storm, see if it was a fad or not. It's turned out not to be a fad. It's turned out there is a woman's viewpoint. I think that's reason enough to consider this, and go co-ed.
Yes. Okay, task.
My name is Richard Schoenberg. Mr. Pyle, you just, when you started talking about yourself and you came to WLUR to deal with people and learn how to deal with people here, you said you thought sitting in the dusty library was maybe not the best way to get a college education. Don't you think women are half the people that you have to learn how to deal with, and you haven't learned yet here?
The question is, are not women people who need to be dealt with?
There are persons here who could answer that on my behalf better than I can, but that's all right. There are two types of persons in the world. There are persons of courtesy whom we, as gentlemen in the process of being polished, are learning to deal with by being in contact with them. And there are other persons, regardless of sex. There are ladies and gentlemen in that first category. There is a vast congeries of men and women in the second. It is our business to learn to deal with them wherever we may find ourselves, deal with them without being false to good faith, honor, things like that. I don't think, again, that you can say there's this sort of difference in kind. We are two different sexes, not two different species, I would point out. There is, I think, a sufficient commonality of species that there is no necessity. Once you learn to deal with people, period, you've got it. You've got it wired. That's all I think needs to be said. Michael? I'm at a loss.
One of the things that I tried to point out in my speech, and I think Markham did too, was that it's been a co-ed world for as long as I think anybody here can remember it. At least I hope it was. And if not, then I don't know, spacecraft landed or something. But for 235 years, more specifically, the 235 years that we've been here, we produced men who can go out in the world and deal with women. Obviously, they've done so successfully. I resent the attitude that because I don't go to school with women, that I go home over Thanksgiving break or at any other time and abuse my date and don't understand my mother and am rude to my aunt and disrespectful to my grandmother. I resent that very much. I don't think that I don't have to go to school with someone from the Soviet Union necessarily to understand some of the things that might prompt a Soviet student to feel the way he feels.
I don't think that the negative side has understood our arguments consistently tonight, and I would agree with the question. That's all I have to say. I think they speak for themselves.
Go ahead.
Okay, matter of time consideration, I will entertain 2 more questions, and then we'll wind this thing up. Mr. Genova.
Bob Genova. I've been interested in the last few months to hear a lot of criticism when something out of the polar research and the people getting big whitehead columns and reading by. And we called Crossville tonight. And we never pretended to supervise the poll and register everyone who voted, and we don't pretend that there weren't some abuses of the poll. We don't pretend to claim that was an informed poll. So we got exactly what we wanted, as the negative side pointed out. Now, what I'm curious to know, particularly from the affirmative side, number one, what should that poll have been? What is the student opinion, since that was so possible? And number two, who is responsible for determining whether or not we go co-ed? Are the students responsible, and are the alumni to be considered? I know the board of is going to make the decision. I'm just curious if you all on both sides feel would appropriately make the decision.
Okay, the question is in 2 parts. What is the student opinion on coeducation? How is that derived? And second part, who is responsible for the decision? Affirmative team will go first.
Okay. Bob Genova, his name has been brought into this because he's president of the student body.
And he asked a question.
Right. It was a mistake to call that poll farcical. We didn't intend to slur anybody by that. It's my opinion that students are in favor of it. Maybe 3-1, like that poll suggests. It's hard to tell because it wasn't a poll. It wasn't scientifically. It was a plebiscite. Those who wanted to vote and knew about the vote got to vote. And I think the students are mostly in favor, or at least were at that point, mostly in favor of coeducation. They're thinking more about it. Now, the average student has been here how long? Maybe 2 years? Okay, I've been here 4.5 years. But the point about input is that, I mean, while the students have the ability to have their decision known, I mean, they're vocal. They get on the front local page of the Roanoke Times when they put a banner on the colonnade. They certainly have a voice, but the responsibility does have to lie with the trustees. I think that's responsible to have the school run by the trustees, run by people who dedicate their lives to this university, who love it. And I think student opinion is very important. I think the process of debate is very important. I don't think this should be the end. I'm personally dismayed that there are no letters in the Ringtown Fire, at least were not of yesterday. In this week's issue about coeducation, I think perhaps the apathy has swollen back up about it. We did not mean to slur that plebiscite or poll or whatever you want to call it. But we do want to say that student opinion has got to be weighed with faculty opinion and alumni opinion. And I think you will find much more division than the other side has suggested tonight.
Wait, how much time is left? Okay. No, that was time.
All right. Bob, as far as the methodology goes, I think you were right. You announce a poll, you give it a couple of weeks to boil, and you get everybody and their dog preaching and proselytizing and trying to go out and sway people's mind. What you wanted and what I think you got was first reaction, gut reaction, even a shock reaction. I understood that to be the purpose of the poll, and so I think that was adequately done. As far as student opinion, all I know is the sort of response the announcement of my participation in this forum garnered, the sort of response that came out from the column in the Phi. I also just happened to hear a great deal. In fact, Bob and I broke the wire story on it on Morning Mag and had an informal and not methodologically fair, I suppose, listener poll. It seems to me fairly substantively against the proposition unless exceeding good reasons can be shown for it, none of which have been shown yet. I believe the alumni feel the same way. Certainly that's what they expressed to you and I, Bob, when we had lunch with the alumni leaders a while back at the ALC conference. And one hears that continuing groundswell. Ultimately, the responsibility for this change lies with the Board of Trustees. That is what boards of trustees are for, but they are called trustees because they have a trust, not a public trust, a private trust, to the constituent elements of the university, the faculty and staff, yes. Also to its present and past students, that great line of W&L men that stretches as far back as anyone living can recall. It is that responsibility and that trust which I hope they do not fail of.
Okay, one last question. Mr. Smith.
My name is Bart Smith. Don't you feel that by excluding women from the academic environment here, admitting them only socially, if you can call what we have around here a social environment, that we are forcing the spirit of academia, which is essential to a university functioning effectively, to be isolated here on the Hill in the classroom and keeping it out of the day-to-day life of the student, keeping it somewhat totally separated from the social life, isolating it and thereby rendering it less effective. Doesn't that diminish the effectiveness of what we want to call our university?
Okay, question is, does excluding women from the academic life of Washington Lee isolate that academic life from people's day-to-day lives?
Bart, my boy, I do not think we're in the process of turning out schizophrenics, no. That does not strike me as a salient feature of the W&L experience, okay? And that seems to be more or less what you're presuming. You say that it is perhaps an unnatural environment, the difference between the social milieu in which we go on weekends and in which we'll go after graduation, and what we're doing academically. That is the nature of a university, unfortunately. You are spending 4 years of your life, at least theoretically, devoted to the pursuit of learning, among other things. This is not something that will characterize most of your later life unless you go to grad school, write a book, and get tenure somewhere, which is a fate not necessarily right or available for many. If I thought that there was some difference in kind between men and women, which means that the contributions they make in a co-ed social atmosphere are such as would carry over into propositions of fact in academe, I would say we were making a mistake. Unfortunately, I see absolutely no evidence for such a proposition. Wherefore, premises considered, I'm inclined to dismiss the notion with prejudice, as it were.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
I'll agree generally that that academics is isolated here on the Hill, but I would not want to be put in the position of saying that there's no intellectual discussion in the fraternities. That's patently wrong. They're very necessary. I've always, and intelligent people are there, and it's not as simple as that. But in qualitative terms, I think it would be less isolating to have.
As I understood the question, it was, aren't we isolated both academically and socially? Am I right? I think that is exactly the point. I do believe, as I've said all night, that we are isolated academically in terms of sex. And I believe that that is true for a significant portion of us socially. Those people who are not affiliated with the fraternity do have a tough time fitting in sometimes. And I think that it would make for a diversity of social experiences if we did go co-ed. I'm not opposed to fraternities. Some people presupposed. I think that they could take a less visible segment of the social life, but I think a variety of ways of life is important to any community. It's the best way I can answer it.
Okay, I'd like to thank all four of our debaters for putting themselves out on the line for the benefit of the analyses of the question. I thank all of you in the studio audience, you listeners at home, and those of you who will be watching this. I'd like to remind you all this will be broadcast 2 weeks from tonight at 7:30 on Cable Channel 9. You're listening to WLUR in Lexington. Thank you. Good night.